There was a bit of hysteria on Twitter yesterday about the potential new Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn being a believer in homeopathy. Apparently, this information, dug up from 2010, indicates a lack of critical thinking skills. Link below. Amused by this, particularly since it was a fellow Scottish independence supporter that was particularly infuriated by his alleged stupidity, I commented that my opinion was that it made him a better candidate. Now, before I go on, you need to know two things. Firstly, my GP as a child had also trained as a homeopath, as he did not believe in prescribing antibiotics for ailments. I am sure he was more flexible about things that actually required antibiotics, but I got through years of tonsillitis and other minor infections without being handed antibiotics at all. He simply employed his understanding of holistic medicine and the self-healing capacity of the body to avoid prescribing them unless they were absolutely necessary. This is quite in keeping with what Corbyn was saying. One of the big concerns in modern medicine, after all, is that we're all using antibiotics far too much. Complementary medicine is seen by some as a useful alternative. The second thing that you would need to understand is that the nature of quite a lot of alternative medicine is based upon your belief in the practitioner. I can assure you of this confidently because after my childhood experience of homeopathy that definitely worked from my GP, I attempted to find a homeopath during a period of neglected ailment and was appalled at the lack of understanding by some who lacked this rather luxurious dual training. In fact, I gave up, instead experimenting with supplements for several years before I originally went raw and discovered what several studies have now confirmed. We feed our pets more carefully than our boards of nutrition recommend that we are fed, due to the influence of commerce, all supported by the NHS. I had this same argument for about 2 years after going raw, even after Dalek, a science fiction fan who believes in the miracle of science to the point that he would rather consider drinking chemicals than eat a salad, watched my weight problem heal and my age reverse by 10 to 15 years in front of his eyes. I went from a sarcastic, rather drunken-sounding mound of misery to a youthful and rather innocent creature in about a year. I think he preferred the mound of misery, to be honest. I then had the science versus belief argument with Twisty, who also tried raw and looked far better briefly. He persists in his disbelief to this day, despite his watching me go from someone who looked great and worked out for several hours a day to someone who can today barely walk if I eat particularly badly. He also refuses to acknowledge that I look completely different dependent upon what I eat, despite having witnessed it with his own eyes, because he was once in the medical field, and this does not sit with his belief in what he was told. The factor they were missing was not blind belief, as Wolf also seemed to think. This tells you quite a lot about why he makes mistakes about people, but a well-grounded willingness to see if it worked. I wonder if this is a generally masculine trait. The idea that you have to wear blinkers and shut out any doubt before you actually try something in case you look stupid. The idea that if you do end up looking stupid for any reason, that it somehow reflects on your mental capacity generally, rather than indicating an open and inquiring mind. To my mind, it does not matter at all if you look stupid. It matters whether whatever you choose actually makes you feel better. I found after much trial and error that about 90% raw was optimal for my own health, but met with a wall of long-term contempt. It was a lot harder to stick to than being left to your own devices. I have been to the NHS with fairly serious-looking problems several times over the last few years, and their response to any problem appears to be to give me a blood test and tell me to go away. Even problems like persistent chest pain are dismissed because my blood looks just great. Presumably I am a liar, and I am certainly not important, even though I am looking after a dependent relative. I would love to know who is accessing all the money they claim people are wasting, because as far as I can see, if you're healthy and have a problem, they tell you to go away because you are laughably hypochondriac. If you're unhealthy and have a problem, they tell you to go away because you're not taking care of yourself. Unless, of course, it is something that requires another antibiotic, or a referral to someone that is simply fascinated by your rash, or whatever. The miracle of science. Speaking as someone who has been through the health issues of 4 elderly people as well as my own, this conveyor belt attitude to medicine seems to be policy now. From regarding the GP as a respected member of the community that you knew well, now you're dealing with an unknown administrator who is there to fob you off with nothing, fob you off with an antibiotic or widely prescribed medicine that has been sold to the NHS in large quantities, or refer you to someone who is interested in the illness rather than making you feel well. This lack of regard for your perception of the person treating you does not bode well for the strictly scientific approach, because if you do not have any cause to believe in your practitioner, the medicine may be ineffective even if it is marvellous at treating the symptoms. There has to be some level of engagement. This is where Corbyn's version of the truth becomes apparent. Complementary medicine, if practiced correctly, can fill this increasingly yawning gap. Rather than being sent away from the GP feeling that you and your health do not matter, your ailment can be treated by someone who thinks that it does. And that is more important for your holistic well-being than anything else, the feeling that you matter.